Hello, everyone. This is Doug Davis, broker in charge with Karanbi Realty. And today in the Ask Doug show, I'm going to talk about earnest money, good faith money. And what's up with this? Is it good? Is it bad? Does it work? What's it for? How much is good or needed? If you cancel, do you get it back? Anyway, I'm going to go over those topics for earnest money. Okay, so first of all, what is it? Earnest money, sometimes called good faith deposit. It's also called consideration. Consideration you need for contract law. Good buyer and you promise to do what you say in the contract and you want to buy it and you're going to do all that. Also called good faith. So very similar. Good faith money that you promise to do what you say you're going to do. You're good for it and you can complete the transaction. But it's money that's at risk if a buyer doesn't do what they contractually promise, what they put in writing on the contract. So, all right, so with that in mind, how much do you put up? Well, strive to get 10% of the purchase price as earnest money, but it doesn't usually happen that way. So it's really completely random. For less for lower price properties, more for higher price properties. And it's usually set out in a two-step process in the contract. So when you write the contract and sign the contract and ready to be presented to the seller, you put up a smaller amount. And then after you get accepted, you go into escrow and you're moving along, you have a home inspection and you approve of the home inspection, among other things. Then there's usually a second earnest money deposit that's put into. So you might see $1,000 to $5,000 for smaller price properties and $10,000 to $50,000 to $100,000 for higher price properties. Do you get it back? Well, if you do what is promised per the contract, for what buyer and seller agreed to, then that money should be credited to the buyer's account towards their down payment or towards their purchase price, or a little bit for either. If not, then seller may claim it. If the buyer does not do what is promised in the contract, that earnest money then is at risk. The seller will try to keep it, and if it's a large deposit, then the buyer might think twice and keep going and do what is promised and move forward and close the sale to retain their money. Or they go backwards and then again, that money's at risk. So in real life, however, it's kind of a different story. So let me tell you about that. The money's held with an escrow company, right? Which is supposed to be a impartial fiduciary for the buyer and seller. They're supposed to be the middleman that does what the contract says. And it's laid out for them to do what the contract says. However, there's a number of escrow companies, at least here in Hawaii, that will a subsequent agreement from the buyer and seller to disperse the money. Well, that's never going to happen. The buyer and seller are in a disagreement, so both of them will want the money. So that's really useless. And then to add insult to injury, some of the escrow will refund the money to one side or the other arbitrarily. not following the contract and not being a fiduciary. So it's kind of scary out there. So it's best to go forward and do what you promised. But if there's a reason, and let's say you do a home inspection and the house is falling down the mountain and you didn't know about that, well, yeah, that'd be a good reason to say I cancel based on my home inspection, and then the money, and it would be returned. But this process is just broken. Buyers don't do as they promise. Escrow companies don't follow the contract. So what do you do here? Last week I mentioned that the British Commonwealth countries, notably Australia, that I know about, they put 10% down and it's non-refundable. So we can make it non-refundable here, but it's going against the grain. However, I'm seeing a little bit more lately because the seller's market it's a very strong seller market. So some of them are demanding that this money after the inspection becomes non-refundable. And by the way, if you say it's non-refundable, you also have to get it released and taken out of escrow during the escrow process. Otherwise, it's still in escrow, and escrow, even if it says it's non-refundable, they're going to require that to be agreed to by buyer and seller again, regardless of their agreement. So it would sit in there. So the only way to make it non-refundable is also to have it released and get your hands on it. This is very one-sided. Sellers have no way to cancel their contracts. Buyers have about a dozen ways to get out of their contract. I went over that last week, the different ways of inspections and review, approval or disapproval. So you might want to look at that too. But the seller's at risk. So this is the only thing that they have to compensate them for damages, money spent, time spent. Maybe they get the survey, maybe they start moving. They're at risk. So non-refundable is not a bad idea, perhaps after the J1 inspection, major inspection of the property. Well, that's a mess, isn't it? But that's what we have to deal with. But if everyone does what they've promised to do, there's no issue, no concern, no problem. So anyway, if that's it for this topic. If you have one that you'd like to hear about, let me know about it. Love to talk about it. Thanks all. Have a great week.